From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Mystery surrounds the discovery of secret emails from President Joe Biden when he was vice president, some of them sent to his son Hunter. Why did he use pseudonyms to communicate government business? Plus, mystery also surrounds the physical condition of Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell as he freezes in a public forum for the second time in several weeks. How ill is the 81-year-old Senate leader, and I should say highly effective Senate leader, and what does it mean for the Republican Party and its chances of regaining control of the Senate in 2024? Welcome, I'm Paul Gigot with the Wall Street Journal editorial page, and I'm here with Kim Strassel and Kate Batchelder Odell, and I want to welcome you both. Thank you for being on. Kim, let's start here with first this strange story about Joe Biden's secret emails. When did we first find out about them? He using a pseudonym for email accounts. And why do these matter?
Sure. We actually first found out about Joe Biden's use of pseudonyms about 2 years ago when there were some news stories showing that emails on Hunter Biden's laptop went back and forth to these odd email addresses. They included robinware456 at Gmail, jrbware at Gmail, another one at least. And it became clear that these were pseudonyms that Joe Biden had used while vice president. And Senators Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson demanded information at that time from the National Archives in the White House. They have been stonewalled. Why this is in the news again is because now we have a greater sense of the scope of just how often and frequently the vice president was using those. There was a conservative nonprofit, the Southeastern Legal Foundation, that revealed on Monday that it had received a letter from the National Archives acknowledging, in response to a request from that nonprofit, that it had more than 5,100 emails that were related to those addresses, which means that they were used quite frequently. And what's suspicious about this is that on a number of these, we know from ones that have been disclosed that they were used to communicate with Hunter Biden. And so the obvious question arises, why was the vice president using an email that was difficult to trace? These are things that no one would necessarily go looking for under federal records to communicate with Hunter, especially in the context of the growing scandal that's been going on about his potential involvement with Hunter in his business dealings.
So these are at the National Archives because the Vice President of the United States, I gather, is obliged to turn over all such communications in office to the archives upon leaving office. Is that correct, Kim?
Yes, absolutely. Even ones that are created on emails other than official email addresses.
Okay, so the archives are there, have them, but nobody would have really known about these had not the Hunter Biden laptop been turned up by the New York Post in the 2020 presidential election campaign, right?
Absolutely, because no one would think to go looking for robinware456 when trying to find email correspondence related to the former vice president.
You don't think,
No.
Kim? I mean, put in that search term.
It obviously springs to my mind when I think Joe Biden.
Yeah, well, I mean, it actually kind of reminds me of that old sketch on Saturday Night Live where he plays the devious Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we're going to plan to take over the world. I mean, why would Joe Biden, Kate, use these secret accounts and pseudonyms? I mean, it's odd because I guess you would use them if you didn't want anybody to know they existed and what you were communicating. What's the point otherwise?
Right. I mean, we're lacking an innocent explanation here, even as I try to search for one. I mean, first of all, I would say to our listeners, you got to watch that SNL skit where, Ronald Reagan's like lowering a map as people leave and speaking several languages. It's a classic. But on the Biden emails, if you were a person of high public profile, maybe you wouldn't want your email to be joe.biden@gmail.com. This is like, for instance, Robert L. Peters, an entirely different alias here that can't just be simply explained by just a different email account. So I think there's no simple explanation. And if there is one, the Biden administration should get it out as soon as possible for its own benefit. I mean, there was a letter that James Comer sent a couple weeks ago now about this issue. And in it, it refers to one specific email from 2016 where there's an email to this Robert L. Peters account. The subject is Friday schedule card, and it's got Joe Biden's schedule on it. And at 9 a.m., he's got a phone call with the president of Ukraine at the time, Poroshenko. And the only person, Comer says, who's CC'd on this email is Hunter Biden. So that is pretty interesting coincidence there and suggests that maybe there is something to this and there's just really not a simple explanation for these aliases.
That was at a time that email was sent when Hunter was on the board of Burisma, the Ukrainian energy company, as I understand it.
Right.
Okay. So there you go. Hunter was doing business in Ukraine. And of course, at the time, Joe Biden was also the point man for the Obama administration on Ukraine affairs.
Well, right. And keep in mind, the White House has been saying that he never had any contact with Hunter about this. And then they were forced to soften that stance when that position got overrun by reality. So it really does undercut some of the narrative they've been putting out there about what's been going on.
All right, let's listen to a clip from James Comer, who is the House Oversight Committee chairman, talking about this.
We found a pseudonym where he copied Hunter Biden, and it would lead one to believe that this was Joe Biden's way of copying Hunter Biden to say, okay, send it to the Burisma owners and tell them help is on the way. And 5 days later, Joe Biden flew to Ukraine to begin the process of firing the prosecutor in exchange for American tax dollars in the form of foreign aid.
So, Kim, is it possible that this was the Biden backdoor to Hunter on the family business? Is that where we really need to get to the bottom of this?
Well, the reason what Comer just said is very damning is that you have to marry that together with the recent testimony we had of Devin Archer, who was Hunter Biden's business partner, who also sat on the board of Burisma. And he came in and was interviewed by House investigators. And he basically made clear that Hunter had been hired in Burisma because of his father, as sort of as an insurance policy, as protection, as it were. The notion that if everyone understood that the vice president's son was sitting on this company, that it would foreclose anybody taking legal action against the company, et cetera. It was protected by powerful people. That was the message that was being sent. And so you do have to then ask was there a way of Biden also signaling to Hunter, as Comer suggested, certain positions that were being taken by the government, et cetera, to clue in the Burisma people about actions that were going to be happening or things that they could count on? All of that would be very, very disturbing and a misuse of presidential power.
So James Comer has requested that the National Archives release all of these emails that it has and any others that they don't know about with pseudonym accounts. And the archives, according to Comer, has said that it is awaiting permission from both the White House in the case of Vice President Biden and then, I guess, the Obama officials of some kind. They're not in office, obviously, but I guess the former president's office does need to give some permission here. Is that where we stand right now?
Yes. So these would fall under the Presidential Records Act. And as that has been much in the news because of Donald Trump, we all know so much more about the Presidential Records Act these days. But it would seem that they need to give some agreement to allow these to be released. I'm not really sure the ins and outs if that's entirely true. It might also be that they are the ones that have to look over any potential redactions that would be made and whether or not those redactions could be released before they went out. The bottom line, though, Paul, is that request has been sitting with this current White House for 2 years, ever since Grassley and Johnson sent that first letter demanding access to these, and they have ignored it. And so for the National Archives to say, oh, yeah, well, this latest tranche, we're just going to leave it up to them to decide how to handle it. That's kind of just slipping responsibility to a group of people that have no interest and have shown no willingness to be transparent.
And I guess the House is going to pursue this. And Kevin McCarthy, House Speaker, has not made a decision yet, but has been suggesting that the House could here in the autumn open up an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. This would be one area of the inquiry. And the reason for doing that would be not because you are dead set on an impeachment path, but that it gives some expanded powers to the House and more authority when it comes to any contested document requests or witness requests, Kate.
As we've talked about on this podcast, once you get an inquiry for impeachment up and going, that machinery becomes very hard to shut down. So I think, Comer will continue to pursue these documents with subpoenas, which is appropriate. But I think the better course of action, again, if the Biden administration has nothing to hide here, and if their narrative, which is that Joe Biden, this is just his son who he loves, who has at times been troubled, They should get this information out there. They really are underestimating the extent to which it's a political liability with voters who have formed pretty bad conclusions about Biden's judgment, even if they don't know exactly what that means. And again, especially if Republicans decide to nominate somebody other than Trump, lacking this baggage, it could really become a liability he can't shake off.